"Lord, don't let my father find me," the beggar girl asked the millionaire while holding her little brother in her arms. Abandoned and scarred by a past of abuse, she feared the man who, after her mother's death, had become her biggest nightmare. The millionaire, touched by her pain, welcomed her into his mansion, promising her protection. Now she has to decide: face her past or keep running from it. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The rain poured mercilessly over the city streets as Sarah huddled closer to her little brother Tommy under the dim light of a park bench. Her thin sweater, soaked through, offered little protection against the biting cold. At just 12 years old, she had already mastered the art of survival, learning to move through the shadows like a ghost, invisible to the world that had shown her so little kindness. Tommy's quiet whimpers brought her attention back to their immediate needs. He was only 6, too young to understand why they couldn't go back to what they once called home. Sarah pulled him closer, trying to share what little warmth she had left. Her dark eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, always vigilant, always waiting for him to appear, the man who had turned their lives into a living nightmare. The park had become their temporary sanctuary after fleeing 3 days ago. Sarah knew the risks of staying in one place too long, but exhaustion had finally caught up with them. Her feet, bare and blistered from running, couldn't carry them any further. The memory of their last night in that house still haunted her. The sound of his heavy footsteps on the creaking stairs, the smell of alcohol that always preceded his rage, the way Tommy trembled in her arms as they hid in the cramped space behind the old washing machine. That night had been different, though. Something in his voice, in the way he had called out their names, had told Sarah they couldn't wait any longer. She had grabbed Tommy's hand, the small backpack she had kept ready for weeks, and they had slipped out through the basement window while his shouts echoed through the empty house. The wind picked up, carrying with it the distant sound of approaching footsteps. Sarah's heart began to race, her body tensing instinctively. But these footsteps were different, lighter, more measured. Through the curtain of rain, she could make out the silhouette of a man approaching their bench. He walked with purpose, but without the threatening swagger she had learned to fear. As he drew closer, the yellow glow of the street lamp revealed an elegant figure in an expensive-looking coat. He carried an umbrella and wore polished shoes that seemed out of place in this forgotten corner of the city. Sarah's first instinct was to run, but Tommy's exhausted weight against her side made that impossible. The stranger stopped a few feet away, his expression changing from surprise to concern as he took in their bedraggled appearance. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle, lacking the harsh edge Sarah had grown accustomed to hearing from adults. Sarah remained silent, her arms tightening protectively around Tommy. The man took a small step closer, careful to move slowly as if approaching a wounded animal. "My name is Richard," he continued, his voice barely audible above the rain. "You shouldn't be out here in this weather, it's not safe." A bitter laugh nearly escaped Sarah's lips, as if anywhere had been safe for them lately. But there was something in Richard's eyes that made her hesitate, a warmth she hadn't seen in so long it felt almost foreign. He held his umbrella out, creating a shelter from the rain above their heads. "I have a warm car parked just around the corner," he said, gesturing vaguely behind him, "and a house with plenty of room. You and your brother could get dry, have something to eat." He paused, studying their faces in the dim light. "No questions asked if that's what you prefer." Tommy stirred against her side, looking up at the stranger with a mixture of hope and fear that broke Sarah's heart. She knew they couldn't stay on the streets forever. The man they were running from would never stop looking for them here. Maybe, just maybe, this was the chance they needed. But trust didn't come easily to Sarah anymore. She had learned the hard way that kindness often came with a price. As if reading her thoughts, Richard took a step back, creating more space between them. "I understand if you're scared," he said softly, "but sometimes we need to take a leap of faith to change our lives." The rain continued to fall around them, but Sarah barely noticed it anymore. She was lost in thought, weighing their options, calculating risks like she had learned to do far too young. Tommy's quiet voice broke. Through her deliberation, "I'm cold." "Sarah?" Those 3 words made the decision for her. Whatever risks lay ahead couldn't be worse than watching her brother suffer through another night in the rain. Slowly, cautiously, she stood up, helping Tommy to his feet. Richard's face softened, with relief, but he remained where he was, allowing them to approach him at their own pace. "There's a blanket in the car," he said, pointing toward a sleek black vehicle parked under a streetlight. "And I know a great place that makes hot chocolate, if you're interested." As they walked toward the car, Sarah kept her guard up, memorizing every detail of their surroundings, planning escape routes out of habit. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous: hope. What she didn't know then was that this moment, this simple decision made on a rainy night, would change not only their lives, but also the life of the lonely millionaire who had found them. The real challenge, however, was just beginning. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't running away from your past. It's learning to trust in a future you never dared to imagine. The mansion loomed before them like something out of a fairy tale, its windows glowing warmly against the night sky. Sarah stood in the marble foyer, water dripping from her clothes onto the polished floor, while Tommy gaped at the crystal chandelier hanging above them. Richard moved ahead, flicking on lights that illuminated spaces larger than their entire old house. "The kitchen's this way," he said, leading them through corridors lined with paintings that probably cost more than Sarah could imagine. "Mrs. Reynolds, my housekeeper, always keeps some soup ready. She'll be here in the morning, but for now we can manage." Sarah remained silent, taking in every detail of their surroundings. The house was immaculate, everything in its place, but there was something lonely about its perfection. No family photos on the walls, no signs of life beyond the carefully arranged furniture and artwork. It reminded her of the model homes she used to peek into during open houses, back when she and Tommy needed warm places to hide on cold afternoons. The kitchen was a marvel of stainless steel and marble, with appliances Sarah didn't even recognize. Richard moved efficiently through the space, heating soup and pulling fresh bread from a bread box. The domesticity of his actions seemed at odds with his expensive suit and carefully maintained appearance. "Please, sit," he gestured to the bar stools, at the kitchen island. Tommy climbed up immediately, but Sarah hesitated, standing close enough to grab her brother if needed. Richard noticed but didn't comment, simply placing bowls of steaming tomato soup in front of them both. "I should introduce myself properly," he said, leaning against the counter at a respectful distance. "I'm Richard Anderson. I own a technology company downtown." He paused, watching as Tommy carefully spooned soup into his mouth. "And you are?" Sarah weighed her options. Their first names wouldn't give away much. "I'm Sarah. This is Tommy." Her voice was barely above a whisper, unused after days of enforced silence. Richard nodded, not pushing for more information. "There are guest rooms upstairs, several of them. You can choose whichever ones you like. There are also clean clothes in the closets. Mrs. Reynolds keeps them stocked for visitors, though I rarely have any." The admission of loneliness in his voice caught Sarah's attention. She studied him more carefully now, the slight slump in his shoulders when he thought they weren't looking, the way his eyes lingered on Tommy's innocent enjoyment of the soup, the careful distance he maintained, even in his own home. "Why are you helping us?" The question escaped before she could stop it, her suspicion getting the better of her careful silence. Richard's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Because someone once helped me a long time ago when I needed it most." He moved to the sink, rinsing his hands even though he hadn't touched anything. "And because no child should have to sleep in the rain." Tommy finished his soup and looked up at Richard with wide eyes. "Do you live here all alone?" A sad smile crossed Richard's face. "Most of the time, yes, my work keeps me busy." He straightened up, adjusting his tie in what seemed like a nervous gesture. "But perhaps it's time for that to change." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety at those words. She had learned to be wary of adults who showed too much interest in them, but Richard's next words surprised her. "You don't have to stay if you don't want to. The choice will always be yours." But if you do stay, there will be rules. Not to control you, but to protect you. Mrs. Reynolds will help with anything you need, and I'll make sure you're both enrolled in school when you're ready. School. The word hit Sarah like a physical force. It had been weeks since they'd attended, not since their mother's illness had taken a turn for the worse. The thought of returning to normal life seemed almost impossible now. "He'll find us," she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "He always does." Richard's expression hardened slightly. "Not here, he won't. I have resources, Sarah. Security systems, lawyers if needed. Whatever or whoever you're running from, you're safe here." But Sarah knew better than to believe in absolute safety. She had seen how quickly security could crumble, how easily promises could be broken. Still, as she watched Tommy stifle a yawn, she knew they needed this chance, however temporary it might be. "Can we—" she hesitated. "Can we stay together, Tommy and me, in the same room?" Richard's face softened. "Of course. There's a suite on the second floor with connecting bedrooms. It would be perfect for you both." As they followed him upstairs, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into another world, one that seemed too good to be true. The suite he showed them was larger than their entire old house, with plush carpets and enormous windows overlooking manicured gardens. "Get some rest," Richard said, standing in the doorway. "We can talk more tomorrow if you want." He left them with clean towels and pajamas that Mrs. Reynolds apparently kept for every possible size of guest. Later, as Sarah lay in the softest bed she'd ever felt, listening to Tommy's steady breathing, from the connecting room, she tried to make sense of their situation. They were safe for now, fed and warm and clean, but experience had taught her that security was an illusion, that comfort could be stripped away in an instant. What she didn't know yet was that Richard had his own demons to face, his own past that would soon collide with theirs in ways none of them could predict. For now, though, she allowed herself to relax just slightly into the embrace of luxury and apparent safety, even as her mind remained alert for the sound of heavy footsteps that had haunted her dreams for so long. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the mansion's polished floors. Sarah stood at the window of her new room, watching the gardeners tend to the immaculate lawn below. It had been a week since Richard had brought them here, and she still couldn't quite believe the reality of their situation. The sound of laughter drew her attention to where Tommy played with Mrs. Reynolds in the garden. The housekeeper had proven to be a warm, grandmotherly figure who seemed to have an endless supply of cookies and patience. Sarah watched as she showed Tommy how to plant flowers in the small patch of earth she had designated as his garden. "He seems happy," Richard's voice came from behind her, causing Sarah to startle slightly. She hadn't heard him approach, a rare lapse in her usually hyper-vigilant state. "Yes," she answered carefully, maintaining her distance. Despite the luxury surrounding them, Sarah couldn't shake the habit of keeping her guard up. "Mrs. Reynolds is good with him." Richard moved to stand beside her at the window, keeping a respectful distance. He was dressed in his usual impeccable suit, ready for another day at the office, but something about his posture seemed tenser than usual. "Sarah," he began, his voice carrying an unusual note of hesitation, "we need to discuss your situation. I've arranged for a meeting with my lawyers this afternoon." He held up a hand as she began to protest. "Just to talk about options, about making this arrangement more official." Sarah's heart began to race. Official meant paperwork. Paperwork meant questions, and questions meant their past catching up with them. "We can't," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He'll find us if we do that." Richard's expression softened, but there was a determination in his eyes that Sarah had come to recognize over the past week. "The man you're running from, he has no legal right to you or Tommy, does he?" Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive gesture she couldn't suppress. He was supposed to take care of us after Mom." She couldn't finish the sentence, the memory of her mother's final days still too raw. "But he didn't take care of you, did he?" Richard's voice had an edge to it now, controlled anger simmering beneath the surface. "Sarah, what he did, whatever he did, it wasn't right. You know that, don't you?" Tears threatened to spill from Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. She had learned long ago that crying didn't solve anything. "You don't understand," she said, her voice stronger now. "He has friends, connections. He always said no one would believe us anyway." Richard turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I believe you, and I have connections too, Sarah. More than you might think." He gestured around the mansion. "This isn't just about money. I have influence, people who owe me favors. I can protect you and Tommy, but only if you let me help." Sarah studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. She had become good at reading adults, at detecting the subtle hints of lies and false promises, but Richard's gaze remained steady, honest. "Why?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since that rainy night. "Why would you do all this for us?" Something flickered across Richard's face, pain perhaps, or recognition. He turned back to the window, watching Tommy chase a butterfly through the garden. "Because 25 years ago I was Tommy's age, living with someone who," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "who didn't know how to be a proper guardian. And no one helped me." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy, with unspoken understanding. Sarah felt something shift in her perception of Richard. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman offering charity. He was someone who understood, truly understood, what they were running from. "What happened to you?" she asked softly, curiosity temporarily overcoming her usual caution. Richard's smile was tinged with sadness. "That's a story for another time. But I made a promise to myself back then. If I ever had the chance to help someone else escape that kind of situation, I would." He checked his expensive watch, a nervous gesture Sarah had noticed he often made. "The lawyers will be here at 2. Mrs. Reynolds can sit with Tommy while we talk. You don't have to decide anything today, but at least hear what options we have." Sarah turned back to the window, watching as Mrs. Reynolds helped Tommy water his newly planted flowers. The simple joy on her brother's face made her heart ache. He deserved this, the safety, the kindness, the chance to just be a child. "He'll never stop looking for us," she said, voicing her deepest fear. "He says we belong to him." Richard's reflection in the window hardened. "You belong to no one but yourselves, Sarah, and some people need to learn that lesson the hard way." There was something in his tone that made Sarah look at him sharply, but his expression had already smoothed back into its usual calm mask. As he turned to leave, Sarah called out, "Richard." He paused in the doorway. "Thank you for believing us." He nodded once, his eyes distant as if seeing something or someone from long ago. "Get some rest before the meeting. Mrs. Reynolds will bring up lunch for you both." With that, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Sarah remained at the window, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. The lawyers would want details, she knew. They would ask questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. But as she watched Tommy laugh in the garden below, she realized that sometimes the scariest step was the one you had to take to protect the ones you loved. The law office occupied the entire top floor of one of downtown's most prestigious buildings. Sarah sat rigid in a leather chair that probably cost more than everything she had ever owned, while Richard spoke quietly with 2 sharp-dressed lawyers by the window. The city sprawled out below them, a maze of streets and buildings that suddenly seemed very small. "Sarah," Richard's gentle voice pulled her from her thoughts, "Mrs. Chen and Mr. Patterson would like to ask you a few questions. Is that okay?" Sarah nodded stiffly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mrs. Chen, a woman with kind eyes behind elegant glasses, sat across from her while Mr. Patterson remained standing, taking notes on a tablet. "Sarah," Mrs. Chen began, her voice soft, but professional, "we want to help make sure you and Tommy stay safe. But to do that, we need to understand your situation better. Can you tell us about the man you were living with?" Sarah's throat felt dry. She glanced at Richard, who had taken a seat nearby, close enough to offer support but far enough to give her space. He nodded encouragingly. "His name is Frank Miller," she said, the name feeling like poison on her tongue. He was supposed to be our guardian after Mom got sick." The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. He worked at the factory downtown. He said he was Mom's friend, that he'd take care of us. But after she was gone, he changed. Mr. Patterson's fingers moved swiftly across his tablet, recording every word. Mrs. Chen's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were gentle. How did he change, Sarah? Sarah's fingers twisted in the fabric of her new dress, one of many Mrs. Reynolds had bought for her. He started drinking more. He'd come home late, angry about everything. He'd yell at Tommy for making noise, even when Tommy was just playing quietly. He'd grab us, shake us. She stopped, the memories threatening to overwhelm her. Did he ever hurt you in other ways, Mrs. Cheney? Asked carefully. Sarah nodded, unable to speak for a moment. From the corner of her eye, she saw Richard's hands clench into fists, though his face remained calm. He said nobody would believe us if we told, Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He said we belonged to him now, that he could do whatever he wanted. He had friends at the police station. He made sure we knew that. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. We've done some preliminary research. Mr. Miller has no legal claim to guardianship of you or your brother. The paperwork he filed after your mother's illness was never properly processed. What does that mean? Sarah asked, hope and fear warring in her chest. Mrs. Chen leaned forward slightly. It means he had no right to keep you. More importantly, it means we can help protect you without having to fight a legal guardianship. But we'll need evidence, Mr. Patterson added. Documentation of the abuse, witnesses if possible. Anything that can help us build a case to keep him away permanently. Sarah felt panic rising in her throat. We don't have anything. We just ran. You have your testimony, Richard spoke up for the first time since the questioning began. And you have me. My word carries weight in this city. Mrs. Chen nodded. Mr. Anderson's support will be significant. But Sarah, anything you can remember, dates, specific incidents, names of people who might have seen something, it would all help. Sarah closed her eyes, forcing herself to think. There was a neighbor, Mrs. Martinez. She used to give us food sometimes when he wouldn't let us eat. And Tommy's teacher, Miss Sullivan, she asked questions about the bruises once. Mr. Patterson made more notes. We'll find them. We'll also need medical records, school records. What about Tommy? Sarah interrupted, her protective instincts flaring. Does he have to talk about it too? Eventually, yes, Mrs. Chen said gently, but we'll handle that very carefully with child psychologists present. For now, your testimony is enough to start the process. Richard stood up, straightening his jacket. What's our next step? We'll file for emergency protective orders immediately, Mr. Patterson said. Given Mr. Anderson's petition for temporary guardianship and the evidence of abuse, we should be able to get them quickly. We'll also alert the authorities about Mr. Miller's behavior. Sarah felt the room spinning slightly. But what if he comes before all that? What if he finds us? Richard's voice was firm. He won't get near you or Tommy. I've doubled security at the mansion. Mrs. Reynolds has been instructed never to let anyone in without my explicit approval. You're safe, Sarah. Mrs. Chen gathered her papers. We'll need you to sign some preliminary paperwork today, Sarah, just to start the process. Are you willing to do that? Sarah looked at Richard, who gave her an encouraging nod. Will it help protect Tommy? Yes, Mrs. Chen assured her. It will help protect you both. Sarah squared her shoulders, summoning courage she didn't know she had. Then I'll sign whatever you need. As she put her signature on document after document, Sarah felt something shifting inside her. Each stroke of the pen felt like another, brick in the wall between them and Frank Miller. But even as hope grew stronger, she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the city below, he was already looking for them, his rage growing with each passing day. The study in Richard's Sigh mansion was a sanctuary of dark wood and leather, walls lined with books that reached to the ceiling. Late at night, after Tommy had gone to bed, Sarah often found Richard here, working at his massive desk or staring pensively out the window. Tonight was no different, except for the tension that seemed to fill the room. There's something you need to know, Richard said, not turning from the window. 2 weeks had passed since their meeting with the lawyers, and Sarah had begun to notice changes in him. Longer hours at the office, hushed phone calls, worried glances when he thought. She wasn't looking. Sarah perched on the edge of a leather armchair, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. She had learned to move quietly through the mansion, a habit she couldn't break despite the growing sense of security. "Frank Miller has been asking questions," Richard continued, his reflection in the window glass looking older than usual. "He's been seen around your old school, talking to teachers, neighbors." He turned to face her, his expression grave. "He's looking for you both systematically." Sarah's heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain calm. "How do you know?" "I have people watching him," Richard admitted. "Private investigators, security teams. I needed to know what we're dealing with." He moved to his desk, picking up a folder she hadn't noticed before. "But that's not all they found." Sarah watched as he struggled with whatever he was about to say. In the past weeks, she had learned to read his expressions, to understand the subtle shifts in his demeanor that betrayed his emotions. "Frank Miller isn't who he claims to be," Richard said finally. "His real name is Francis Millerton. He changed it 10 years ago after some trouble in another state." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "He has a history, Sarah. A pattern of inserting himself into vulnerable families, gaining their trust and then destroying them," Sarah finished, her voice hollow. The pieces were falling into place. Why her mother had trusted him so quickly. Why he had seemed so eager to help when she got sick. Why he had been so careful to isolate them from everyone else. Richard nodded grimly. "There were other families, before yours. He's careful, methodical. He knows how to work the system, how to avoid leaving evidence. That's why he has those police connections he bragged about. He cultivates them deliberately." Sarah stood up, needing to move, to process this information. Did Mom know about his past?" "No," Richard said softly. "My investigators found nothing to suggest she knew. He targeted her when she was most vulnerable, when she was already struggling with her illness and worried about your future." Anger flared in Sarah's chest, not just at Frank, but at the world that had allowed this to happen. "Why are you telling me this now?" Richard's expression hardened. "Because he's escalating. He's not just looking for you anymore. He's trying to build a case against me. He's spreading rumors, suggesting I kidnapped you both, that I'm the one who should be investigated." "But that's ridiculous," Sarah protested. "We ran away from him. You helped us." "The truth doesn't always matter to people like him," Richard said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They know how to twist facts, how to play on people's prejudices. A wealthy single man taking in 2 children? He's trying to make it look suspicious." Sarah felt the floor shifting beneath her feet. Everything they had built here, the safety they had found, suddenly seemed fragile. "What do we do?" Richard moved around the desk, kneeling before her chair to meet her eyes. "We fight. But to do that effectively, I need you to tell me everything. Sarah, every detail you can remember about your time with him, no matter how small or seemingly unimportant." Sarah hugged herself, old memories threatening to surface. Some things are hard to talk about." "I know," Richard said gently. "But tomorrow, a child psychologist is coming to talk with you and Tommy. Dr. Elizabeth Carter. She specializes in helping children who have been through trauma. She'll help you both process what happened, and everything you tell her will help build our case against him." "Tommy too?" Sarah asked, protective instinct flaring. "He's so young." He's finally starting to smile again. Richard nodded. "Dr. Carter knows how to work with children his age. She'll make it feel like play, not an interrogation. But Sarah," he hesitated, "we need to document everything. Every bruise, every threat, every time he made you feel afraid. It's the only way to ensure he can never hurt anyone else again." Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the darkened gardens below. Somewhere out there, Frank was plotting, scheming, trying to tear apart the fragile piece they had found. But this time she wasn't alone. This time she had someone in her corner who understood the game Frank was playing. "There's something else," Richard said, his voice taking on an odd tone. "Something in his past that connects to my own history. I'm still piecing it together. but I think there's a reason he's fighting so hard to get to you both, a reason beyond his usual pattern. Sarah turned to face him, seeing the struggle in his eyes. What do you mean? Richard ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a rare gesture of discomfort. 25 years ago, when I was in a situation similar to yours, I think he was involved somehow. I can't prove it yet, but the coincidences are too strong to ignore. The revelation hung in the air between them, adding another layer of complexity to their already complicated situation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that their story was more intertwined with Richard's past than any of them had imagined. Whatever happens, Richard said firmly, I won't let him hurt you or Tommy, but we need to be prepared. Sarah, the fight ahead won't be easy, and it won't just be in the courtroom. Are you ready for that? Sarah looked at her reflection in the window, seeing not the scared girl who had huddled on a park bench in the rain, but someone stronger, someone who had survived. Yes, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready to fight. Dr. Elizabeth Carter's office was designed to put children at ease, with soft colors and comfortable furniture scattered throughout. Sarah watched through a one-way mirror as Tommy sat on a plush rug, building a tower with wooden blocks, while talking animatedly with the doctor. From this angle, he looked almost like his old self again, the happy, carefree child he had been before everything changed. He's doing remarkably well, Dr. Carter had told her earlier, after their own intense session. Children are resilient, Sarah. With the right support, they can overcome tremendous challenges. Now standing beside Richard in the observation room, Sarah felt torn between pride in Tommy's strength and fear for what was to come. The morning's newspaper lay on a table nearby, its headline making her stomach churn. Tech mogul under investigation. Questions arise about children in his care. The article is just the beginning, Richard said quietly, his eyes fixed on Tommy and Dr. Carter. Frank's starting his campaign to discredit me. He's trying to paint himself as the concerned guardian, searching for his missing wards. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. But he has no right to us. You said so yourself, the guardianship papers were never properly filed. Legal rights don't matter in the court of public opinion, Richard replied, his voice tight. He's playing on people's natural suspicions, their tendency to believe the worst about those with wealth and power. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Reynolds entered, her usually cheerful face drawn with concern. Mr. Anderson, the reporters are gathering at the mansion gates. They're demanding statements about the newspaper article. Richard's jaw tightened. Already? He's moving faster than we anticipated. He turned to Sarah. We need to get you and Tommy home through the private entrance. Mrs. Reynolds will take you while I handle the press. No, Sarah said firmly, surprising herself with her own conviction. I want to help. Those reporters, they're writing about us, about our lives. Shouldn't they hear the truth from someone who lived it? Richard studied her face carefully. Sarah, facing the press means exposing yourself. Once your story is public, there's no taking it back. Are you sure you're ready for that? Before she could answer, Tommy's voice came through the speakers from the other room. He was telling Dr. Carter about his new garden at Richard's house, about the flowers he had planted with Mrs. Reynolds. His voice was full of joy and hope, emotions Sarah had feared she might never hear from him again. I'm sure, she said, drawing strength from her brother's happiness. Frank tried to silence us for so long, made us believe no one would listen. Maybe it's time someone did. Richard's expression softened with pride and concern. We'll need to be strategic about this. A controlled interview on our terms with a reporter we trust. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. I know someone at the Chronicle, Catherine Wells. She's known for her investigative work in child advocacy cases. Sarah nodded, her heart racing but her resolve firm. When? Tomorrow morning, Richard decided. That gives us time to prepare to work with Dr. Carter on how to handle the questions. He paused, watching as Tommy laughed at something the doctor had said. But Sarah, once we do this, Frank will retaliate. He won't take this challenge to his narrative lightly. I know, Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. But I'm tired of hiding. tired of letting him control our story. Tommy deserves better than that. We both do. Mrs. Reynolds touched Sarah's shoulder gently. I'll help you prepare, dear. We can work on what to wear, how to present yourself. These things shouldn't matter, but they do to the public. Richard's phone buzzed with an incoming message. His face darkened as he read it. Frank's just filed a formal complaint with Child Protective Services. He's requesting an immediate investigation into your living conditions at the mansion. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Can they take us away? No, Richard said firmly. We have too much documentation, too many professionals already involved in your case. But it means we'll have visitors, social workers, investigators. They'll need to interview you both, inspect the house, evaluate my fitness as a guardian. Takisu. Weight of what they were facing settled over the room. Through the window, Tommy continued playing, oblivious to the storm gathering around them. Sarah watched him, drawing strength from his innocence, his resilience. Whatever it takes, she said, meeting Richard's eyes. We'll do whatever it takes to keep him safe. Richard nodded, his expression resolute. Tomorrow we start fighting back, not just for you and Tommy, but for every child Frank has ever hurt. He looked down at his phone again, his face troubled. But Sarah, there's something else you should know. My investigators just found a connection between Frank and my past, something that explains why he's fighting so hard to get to you both. Sarah held her breath, waiting for the revelation that would change everything they thought they knew about their situation. The mansion's library had become a war room, its elegant wooden tables covered with documents, photographs, and newspaper clippings. Richard stood before a large whiteboard he'd had installed, connecting red strings between various pieces of information. Sarah sat in one of the leather armchairs, trying to process what he had just told her. 25 years ago, Richard continued, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. When I was just a child, there was a man who worked with troubled families. He called himself a family counselor, but his real purpose was to identify vulnerable children he could exploit. Sarah's throat felt dry. Frank? No, Richard said, pinning another photograph to the board. His name was Gerald Winston. He worked with a network of people who would insert themselves into broken families, gain their trust, and then he paused, collecting himself. Frank Miller, or Francis Millerton, was one of his protégés. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. So when you said you recognized something in our situation, I recognized the pattern, Richard finished. The same techniques, the same careful grooming of the family, the same way of isolating the children. He turned to face her, his expression haunted. When I saw you and Tommy that night in the rain, something felt familiar. I didn't understand why until my investigators made the connection. Sarah stood up, moving closer to the board. Among the photographs and documents, she saw newspaper clippings from decades ago. Stories about missing children, troubled families, investigations that went nowhere. What happened to Gerald Winston? Richard's face hardened. He disappeared 20 years ago, just when authorities were closing in. But his network and his methods, they lived on through people like Frank. He pointed to a series of photographs showing different men, different cities, but the same predatory pattern. They're careful, methodical. They choose families where the children are already vulnerable. Single parents, illness, financial troubles. Like us, Sarah whispered, remembering how Frank had first appeared in their lives, offering help when their mother's illness had left them desperate. Yes, Richard said softly. But Sarah, there's more. He hesitated, then pulled out a folder from his desk. My investigators found something in Gerald Winston's old records, a list of families he was targeting before he disappeared. He opened the folder, revealing yellowed, papers covered in handwritten notes. Your mother's name was on it. Sarah felt the room spin slightly. But that's impossible. Mom would have only been a teenager then. Exactly, Richard said, his voice grim. He was playing the long game, identifying vulnerable young people who might one day become single parents, keeping track of them over years. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of deep distress. Frank didn't randomly choose your family, Sarah. he was following a plan set in motion decades ago. The implications were staggering. Sarah sank back into her chair, trying to make sense of it all. But why? Why go to all that trouble? Richard's expression darkened. Control, power. These men, they don't just want to hurt children. They want to shape them, mold them into what they want them to be. He paused, struggling with his next words. Some of the children they targeted, they were groomed to become part of their network. Horror washed over Sarah as she understood what he was saying. You think Frank was trying to make you and Tommy like him? Yes. Richard's voice was barely controlled. But that's not going to happen. We're going to stop this cycle, Sarah. Not just for you and Tommy, but for all the other children they might target. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Reynolds entered, looking worried. Mr. Anderson, the reporter from the Chronicle, is here and... She hesitated. There's something else. A package was just delivered. It's from him. Richard's posture stiffened. Frank? Mrs. Reynolds nodded, holding out a plain brown envelope. It was left at the gate. Security checked it. No dangerous materials. Richard took the envelope carefully, as if it might bite. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note. Sarah watched as all color drained from his face. Richard? She asked, fear creeping into her voice. What is it? He handed her the photograph with trembling hands. It showed a much younger Richard, perhaps 12 or 13, standing next to a man she didn't recognize. But something about the man's smile, his possessive hand on young Richard's shoulder, made her skin crawl. Gerald Winston, Richard said quietly. The man who tried to do to me what Frank tried to do to you. The note was simple, written in an elegant hand that somehow made its message even more chilling. You can't protect them, Richard. You couldn't even protect yourself. Sarah looked up at Richard, seeing for the first time not just their protector, but a fellow survivor. He's trying to scare us. Richard nodded, his jaw set. Yes, but he's made a mistake. He's shown his hand too early. He turned back to the board, pinning up the photograph and the note. He thinks this will weaken us, make us doubt ourselves, but he's wrong. Sarah stood beside him, looking at the evidence of decades of calculated evil spread out before them. What do we do now? Now, Richard's voice was steel. Now we use this. The reporter from the Chronicle isn't just here for your story anymore. She's here to help us expose everything. The whole network, the decades of manipulation, all of... He looked at Sarah, his eyes fierce with determination. Are you still ready to fight? Sarah thought of Tommy playing in his garden, finally feeling safe. She thought of all the other children out there, marked by predators like Frank and Gerald Winston, waiting to be exploited. Her voice was steady when she answered, more than ever. Catherine Wells had the kind of face that made people want to tell her their secrets. Sitting in Richard's sunlit conservatory, her notebook open before her, she listened intently as Sarah began to share her story. The morning light filtered through the glass ceiling, creating patterns on the marble floor that Tommy traced with his toy car, supervised by Mrs. Reynolds in the corner. Take your time, Catherine said gently, after Sarah paused during a particularly difficult part of her narrative. We want to get this right. Richard stood by the window, his protective presence a constant reminder that Sarah wasn't alone anymore. She took a deep breath and continued, describing how Frank had first entered their lives, how he had seemed like an answer to their prayers when their mother's illness had left them desperate for help. He knew exactly what to say, Sarah explained, her voice stronger now. He talked about how he had helped other families, how he could make sure Tommy and I stayed together. Mum was so worried about what would happen to us. She wanted to believe him. Catherine nodded, taking careful notes. And after your mother's illness progressed, did his behavior change? Sarah glanced at Tommy, making sure he was absorbed in his play. Yes, it started small at first. Stricter rules, harsher punishments for tiny mistakes. He would say it was for our own good, that he was teaching us discipline. She swallowed hard. Then the drinking got worse, and with it, his temper. May I ask about the night you decided to leave? Catherine's voice was gentle but professional. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, remembering. He came home earlier than usual that night. Something was different about him, his voice, his eyes. He kept talking about taking us away somewhere, about how we needed to be reformed properly. She shuddered at the memory. I knew we couldn't wait any longer. Catherine turned to Richard. And you found them that same night? In the park, Richard confirmed, moving to sit near Sarah. 2 children in the rain, trying to be invisible to the world. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But what? I saw in Sarah's eyes that night, it wasn't just fear, it was determination, strength. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. In the weeks since that night, Richard had become more than just a protector. He had become family. Sarah, Catherine said, her expression serious, Mr. Anderson has shared with me the connection between your situation and the larger network. To have individuals like Frank Miller. Are you comfortable with me including that in the story? Sarah straightened in her chair. Yes. People need to know that these aren't isolated incidents, that there are others out there, targeting families when they're most vulnerable. But there's something else you should include, Richard interjected, sharing a look with Sarah. Something we discovered just yesterday. Catherine leaned forward, her reporter's instincts clearly engaged. Go on. Frank Miller isn't working alone, Sarah said, her voice steady. He's part of a network that's been operating for decades, and they don't just target random families, they choose them years in advance, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. As Sarah and Richard laid out the evidence they had uncovered, the connection to Gerald Winston, the long-term manipulation, the careful grooming of vulnerable families, Catherine's expression grew increasingly grave. This is bigger than I imagined, she said finally, looking up from her notes. We're not just talking about one predator. We're talking about a systematic operation that's been targeting families for generations. That's why we need this story told, Richard said firmly. Not just for Sarah and Tommy, but for all the other families they might be watching right now. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the conservatory windows, they could see several cars pulling up to the mansion's gates. Mrs. Reynolds hurried over, her face concerned. Mr. Anderson, she said quietly, Child Protective Services has arrived and... She hesitated. They're not alone. Frank Miller is with them. Sarah felt her heart stop. Across the room, Tommy looked up from his toys, sensing the tension in the air. Catherine closed her notebook decisively. Perfect timing, she said, her voice hard with determination. Let them come. They want to investigate? Let them see exactly what we're uncovering here. Richard moved to stand between Sarah and the windows, his posture protective but controlled. Catherine, are you willing to stay, to witness whatever happens next? The reporter's eyes gleamed with purpose. Try to make me leave. This story just got even bigger. Sarah stood up, moving to gather Tommy in her arms. She could feel the trembling in his small body, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw her own determination reflected back. We're not running, she said firmly, looking from Richard to Catherine. Not this time. Let them come. Let them. See that we're not afraid anymore. As the sound of car doors slamming echoed from outside, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. The truth was finally coming to light, and not even Frank Miller could push it back into the shadows. The mansion's grand foyer had never felt so small as it did now, filled with the tension of the impending confrontation. Two Child Protective Services workers stood near the entrance, their expressions professionally neutral as they reviewed documents on their tablets. Behind them, Frank Miller's presence seemed to darken the very air, his familiar calculating smile sending chills down Sarah's spine. Richard stood at the base of the sweeping staircase, every inch the powerful businessman in his perfectly tailored suit. I assume you have the necessary warrants and documentation. His voice was cool, controlled, but Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders. Everything's in order, Mr. Anderson, the senior CPS worker, a woman who had introduced herself. As Ms. Parker replied, we're here to conduct a welfare check on Sarah and Thomas Miller, following serious allegations about their living conditions and the circumstances of their removal from their legal guardian. Former guardian, Catherine Wells interjected, From her position near the study door, her reporter's notebook now replaced by a digital recorder. I believe you'll find Mr. Miller's guardianship was never properly established. Frank's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Now, there's no need for hostility. I'm simply concerned about the children's well-being. His gaze fixed on Sarah, who stood protectively in front of Tommy. Sarah, sweetheart, you know I've only ever wanted what's best for you both. The familiar, patronizing tone, the false concern, it all hit Sarah like a physical blow. But this time, something was different. This time, she wasn't a helpless child trying to survive his manipulation. Best for us? Sarah's voice rang, out clear and strong in the foyer. Like when you locked us in the basement for 2 days because Tommy cried too much, or when you told the school I fell down the stairs when you were the one who pushed me. Frank's expression flickered, a brief crack in his carefully constructed mask. Sarah, you know that's not true. You're confused, manipulated by... He cast a meaningful glance at Richard. People who don't have your best interests at heart. I believe, Richard said smoothly, that we should conduct this discussion in the presence of Sarah and Tommy's legal advocate. Mrs. Chen should be here any moment. As if on cue, the front door opened again, admitting the elegant figure of Mrs. Chen, followed by Mr. Patterson. The lawyers moved immediately to stand near Sarah and Tommy, creating a protective barrier between them and Frank. Before we proceed, Mrs. Chen announced, opening her briefcase, I have some documents that the court will find very interesting. She pulled out a thick folder, including evidence of Mr. Miller's previous identities and his connection to a larger network of child exploiters. The CPS workers exchanged glances, their professional detachment wavering slightly. Ms. Parker stepped forward. Perhaps we should discuss this in private. No, Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. No more secrets, no more private discussions where children aren't allowed to speak. She felt Tommy's hand slip into hers, squeezing tight. Everything that happened to us, everything he did, it needs to be heard. Catherine Wells had moved closer, her recorder capturing every word. Frank's composed facade began to show more cracks, his eyes darting between the various faces in the room. This is absurd, he said, but his voice had lost some of its smoothness. These accusations are completely unfounded. I can provide character, references, documentation of my community service, like the character references from Gerald Winston. Richard's question cut through the room like a blade. Or should I say, the references you forged after he disappeared 20 years ago. The name hit Frank like a physical blow. For the first time, real fear flashed across his face. I don't know what you're talking about. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, laying photographs on a nearby table. These were taken in 1999, Mr. Miller, or should I say Mr. Millerton. They show you with Gerald Winston and several other men, all of whom have since been investigated for child exploitation. The CPS workers moved closer to examine the photographs. Ms. Parker's professional mask slipped further as she studied them. These will need to be verified. They already have been, Mr. Patterson said, producing another document, along with evidence of Mr. Miller's systematic targeting of vulnerable families across 3 states. The FBI has been very interested in this information. Frank's composure cracked completely, his face contorted with rage as he took a step toward Sarah. You ungrateful little... But he never finished the sentence. Richard moved with surprising speed, placing himself between Frank and the children. At the same moment, 2 police officers who had been waiting quietly by the door stepped forward. Mr. Miller, one of them said firmly, I believe it's time for you to leave. We have some questions for you down at the station. The next few moments seemed to move in slow motion. Sarah watched as Frank's carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. The mask of concerned guardian fell away completely, replaced by the true face of the man who had terrorized them for so long. This isn't over, he snarled, even as the officers moved to escort him out. You think you're safe now? You think... You've won. There are others like me, more than you know. We're everywhere, watching, waiting. No, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the foyer. You're the one who's finished watching and waiting, and we're not afraid anymore. As Frank was led away, his threat still echoing in the marble hallway, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long began to loosen its grip. But even as relief flooded through her, she knew this wasn't truly the end. Because Frank had been right about one thing, there were others out there. And now that she and Richard had begun to uncover the truth, they had become an even bigger threat to the shadowy network that had operated in secret for so long. The study was quiet in the aftermath of Frank's departure. Evening shadows stretched across the carpet as Sarah sat in her favorite armchair, watching Tommy sleep peacefully on the leather couch. The events of the day had exhausted him, but his face was serene, unburdened for the first time in months. Richard stood by his desk, speaking quietly on the phone with his security team. Catherine Wells had left hours ago, armed with enough material for what she promised would be a groundbreaking expose. The CPS workers had conducted their inspection, interviewed everyone present, and departed with assurances that their report would reflect the true situation. "The police have him in custody," Richard announced, ending his call. "They're questioning him now about his connections to Gerald Winston's network." He moved to sit in the chair opposite Sarah, his expression both relieved and troubled. "But this is just the beginning." Sarah nodded, absently running her fingers through Tommy's hair as he slept. "Because of what he said about others watching?" "Yes." Richard leaned forward, his voice low to avoid waking Tommy. "Frank's arrest will send ripples through their network. Some will go to ground, try to hide their tracks. Others might become desperate, dangerous." "Like cornered animals," Sarah murmured, remembering the wild look in Frank's eyes as he was led away. "Exactly." Richard glanced at his phone as another message came in. "The FBI's organized crime unit is involved now. They've been building a case against this network for years, but they never had enough evidence to connect all the pieces. Until now," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "Because we showed how Frank was connected to Gerald Winston and how they chose their families." "You did that," Richard corrected gently. "Your courage in speaking out, in facing him, it's given the authorities the break they've been waiting for." Sarah felt a strange mix of pride and fear. "But what happens now?" "To us, I mean." Richard's expression softened. "Now we make it official. The lawyers are preparing permanent guardianship papers. If you're willing." He hesitated, showing a rare moment of uncertainty. "I'd like to adopt you both legally, properly." The word adopt hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah looked at Tommy, at the way he had curled himself into the soft leather of the couch, totally at ease in this place that had become their sanctuary. "What about the others?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The other families they're watching." "We help them," Richard said simply. "The evidence we've uncovered, the pattern we've exposed, it gives us a chance to identify potential targets before they're approached. Catherine's article will warn people what to look for, how these predators operate." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing everything. "When I was little, before Mom got sick, she used to read us stories about heroes who fought dragons and saved people." She looked up at Richard, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I never thought I'd become one." "You always were one," Richard said softly. "From the moment you decided to protect Tommy, to find a way out, you were a hero. You just needed a chance to show it." A gentle knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Reynolds entered with a tray of hot chocolate and cookies, her motherly presence a balm to their frayed nerves. "The security team has finished their sweep of the grounds," she reported quietly. "Everything's secure, and Mrs. Chen called. She'll be here first thing in the morning with the adoption paperwork." Sarah watched as Mrs. Reynolds carefully set a cookie beside Tommy's sleeping form, tucking his favorite blanket more securely around him. The simple gesture of love brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Is this real?" she whispered, more to herself than to Richard. "Are we really safe now?" Richard moved to kneel beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. "Yes, you're safe. But more than that, you're home. If you want to be." Sarah looked around the study, at the books lining the walls, the soft lamplight, the comfortable chairs where she had spent so many hours talking with Richard. She looked at Tommy, peaceful in his sleep, and at Mrs. Reynolds fussing with the cookie arrangement. This was what a real family felt like. Home, she repeated, testing the word. I think we'd like that. But even as warmth filled her heart, Sarah couldn't forget Frank's final words. Somewhere out there, other children were still in danger. Other families were being watched and targeted. Their victory today wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Looking at Richard, she saw the same understanding in his eyes. They had won this battle, but the war against people like Frank and Gerald Winston was far from over. Yet for the first time, Sarah felt truly ready to fight. Because now she knew the most important truth of all. She wasn't alone anymore. Catherine Wells's article hit the morning papers like a bomb. Predators among us, the systematic targeting of vulnerable families, sprawled across the front page of the Chronicle, accompanied by carefully curated photographs and documents that exposed decades of manipulation and abuse. Sarah sat at the breakfast table, reading through the article for the third time, while Richard handled a constant stream of phone calls in his study. "Your story has sparked something remarkable," Mrs. Reynolds said, placing a fresh cup of hot chocolate in front of Sarah. "The police hotline has been flooded with calls since dawn, other families coming forward sharing similar experiences." Tommy looked up from his pancakes, syrup dripping from his fork. "Are we helping them, Sarah? The other kids like us?" Sarah reached across the table to wipe a smudge of syrup from his cheek. "Yes, Tommy, we're helping them by telling the truth." The sound of Richard's footsteps drew their attention to the doorway. He looked tired but determined, his usual impeccable appearance slightly rumpled after hours of calls. "The FBI just contacted me," he announced, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Reynolds. "They've identified 3 more members of the network. In different states. Arrests are being made as we speak." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. "What about Gerald Winston?" Richard's expression tightened. Still no sign of him, but they're following new leads based on the information Frank provided during questioning. He sat down heavily in his chair. "He's been talking all night trying to negotiate a better deal for himself." "Typical," Sarah muttered, remembering how Frank had always looked out for himself first. "He's probably throwing everyone else under the bus to save his own skin." "Exactly," Richard agreed, "and that's working in our favor. Every name he gives up, every operation he exposes, helps us dismantle more of the network." Mrs. Reynolds cleared her throat delicately. "The adoption lawyer called while you were on the phone, Mr. Anderson. She's moved up the hearing date. They want to process everything as quickly as possible given the circumstances." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Despite everything they'd been through, the idea of making their family official still felt surreal. Tommy reached across the table to grab her hand, his small fingers squeezing tightly. "There's something else," Richard said, his voice taking on a careful tone that immediately put Sarah on alert. "The FBI found something in Frank's personal files, something about your mother." Sarah felt her breath catch. "What about her?" Richard pulled out his phone, pulling up an image. "This was taken 15 years ago." He slid the phone across the table. The photograph showed a much younger version of their mother, sitting in what looked like a college classroom. Standing behind her was a face Sarah recognized from other photographs, Gerald Winston. "He was her professor," Richard explained gently. "Before he disappeared, before he went underground, he marked her then, added her to his list of potential targets." He paused, letting Sarah process this information. "Frank didn't randomly choose your family when your mother got sick. He was assigned to you years in advance." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. All this time, she had thought their encounter with Frank had been bad luck, a terrible coincidence, but it had been planned, calculated, set in motion before she was even born. "Did Mom know?" Tommy asked in a small voice. "Did she know he was bad?" "No, sweetheart," Mrs. Reynolds answered quickly, moving to put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Your mother only wanted to protect you both. She never knew about their real plans." Sarah stood up abruptly, needing to move. She walked to the window, looking out at the garden where she and Tommy had begun to feel safe. All those years, they were watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Yes," Richard said, coming to stand beside her. But that's why. Exposing them now is so important. Every family we identify from their lists, every potential target we warn, it's another chance to break their cycle. A notification pinged on Richard's phone. His expression changed as he read it, a mix of shock and something else Sarah couldn't quite read. "What is it?" she asked, recognizing the tension in his posture. "They found another list," he said, slowly. In a safety deposit box Frank maintained under one of his aliases. It's not just potential targets, it's names of everyone involved in the network, including, he swallowed hard, including the location where Gerald Winston has been hiding all these years. The implications of this discovery hung heavy, in the air. Finding Gerald Winston wouldn't just mean justice for his past crimes, it would mean exposing the entire leadership of the network that had terrorized families for decades. "Richard," Sarah said, studying his face carefully. "What? Aren't you telling me?" He met her eyes, and in them she saw a conflict raging. The safe deposit box contained something else, something about why Gerald Winston disappeared 20 years ago. He took a deep breath. "Sarah, he's been hiding in plain sight, working. Under a new identity, an identity that connects him directly to your mother's illness." Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her feet as she began to understand what Richard was suggesting. The pieces were falling into place, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known she was solving until this moment. The mansion's library had become a maze of documents, photographs, and connecting threads. Sarah stood before the evidence wall, trying to process the staggering revelation Richard had just shared. Her mother's medical records were spread across the table, along with personnel files from the hospital where she had received treatment. "Dr. Gerald Matthews," Sarah read from the hospital ID badge in the photograph. The man's face was different, altered by plastic surgery and time, but the eyes were unmistakably those of Gerald Winston. He was her doctor. Richard nodded grimly. He reinvented himself as a specialist in rare diseases, used his new identity to continue monitoring the families on his list, all while maintaining his position of trust in the medical community. Tommy sat in the corner with Mrs. Reynolds, working on a puzzle, but Sarah could tell he was listening to every word. He had grown more perceptive through their ordeal, more aware of the undercurrents of adult conversations. "But why?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Why go to all that trouble?" "Control," Richard said, pinning another document to the wall. By positioning himself as a trusted medical professional, he gained access to vulnerable families at their weakest moments. He could influence their treatment, their decisions. He hesitated, looking at Sarah with pain in his eyes. Their outcomes. The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. Are you saying he made Mom sick?" Richard moved to sit beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "The FBI is investigating the treatment protocols he prescribed for several patients, including your mother. They found evidence of systematic manipulation of medications, of treatments designed to create dependency rather than cure." Sarah felt the room spin. All this time she had thought her mother's illness was just cruel fate. But to think it had been orchestrated, planned as part of some larger scheme. The network wasn't just about exploiting vulnerable families, Richard continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. It was about creating vulnerability. Gerald Winston found a way to place himself at the top of the medical hierarchy, where he could orchestrate everything. The illnesses, the treatments, the introduction of helpful friends like Frank. "Like a spider at the center of a web," Sarah whispered, remembering how Frank had appeared in their lives just when they were most desperate for help. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Chen entered, carrying a thick folder of legal documents. "The FBI just released this information for the case file," she said, her usually composed face showing signs of distress. "They've found similar patterns at 3 other hospitals where Dr. Matthews worked." "How many families?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Dozens," Mrs. Chen replied softly. "Going back 20 years, but Sarah..." She exchanged a look with Richard. "There's something else. Something about your mother's final days at the hospital." Richard stood up, moving to the window. "Tell her." Mrs. Chen opened the folder, pulling out a hospital record. "Your mother started showing signs of improvement 3 days before she took a sudden turn for the worse. The attending nurse made a note about unauthorized changes to her medication, but the complaint was never investigated. Dr. Matthews Winston signed off on everything." Sarah felt her legs give way, sinking into a nearby chair. Tommy immediately left his puzzle, coming to wrap his arms around her waist. His presence anchored her, reminded her why they had to stay strong. "He's going to pay for this," Richard said, his voice carrying a steel she had never heard before. "All of them are. The FBI has enough evidence now to bring down the entire network." "But first they have to find him," Sarah said, holding Tommy close. "And he's had 20 years to perfect his disappearing act." Richard turned from the window, his expression determined. "That's where we have an advantage he doesn't expect. Because this time, we know something he doesn't." Sarah looked up, recognizing the tone in his voice. "What do you mean?" "Gerald Winston, Dr. Matthews, has a routine. Every year on the same day he visits a private bank in Switzerland. It's how he's maintained his hidden accounts, his false identities." Richard moved to the evidence wall, pointing to a bank statement. "And that day is tomorrow." The implications of this information hung in the air. After decades of hiding in the shadows, orchestrating his web of manipulation and control, Gerald Winston was about to make himself vulnerable. "The FBI is coordinating with Swiss authorities, Mrs. Chen added. "They'll be ready when he arrives at the bank." Sarah stood up, still holding Tommy's hand. "What do we do now?" Richard's expression was a mixture of determination and concern. "Now, we make sure you're both safe. Because when Winston realizes he's been exposed, when he understands that his entire network is crumbling," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah looked around the library at the evidence of decades of calculated evil spread out before them. Somewhere in the city, Frank sat in a cell, spilling secrets to save himself. And halfway across the world, the architect of all their suffering was about to walk into a trap of his own making. But even as fear tried to take hold, Sarah felt something stronger rising within her. A determination to see this through to the end, to ensure that no other family would suffer as they had. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't just in surviving, it's in making sure you're the last one who has to fight that particular battle. The tension in Richard's private office was palpable as they watched the secure video feed from Switzerland. FBI agents, disguised as bank employees, moved purposefully through the marble halls of the prestigious financial institution. In less than an hour, Gerald Winston, or Dr. Matthews as he was now known, would arrive for his annual visit. "The Swiss authorities have sealed off all potential escape routes," Richard explained, pointing to different areas on the blueprints spread across his desk. "He'll be caught the moment he enters the building." Sarah sat beside Tommy on the leather couch, both children unusually quiet, as they watched the preparations unfold on multiple screens. Mrs. Reynolds had tried to convince them to wait elsewhere, but Sarah had insisted on being present. She needed to see this end with her own eyes. "What if he suspects something?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her since they'd learned of the plan. "He's evaded capture for 20 years. Richard's phone buzzed with an incoming message. His expression tightened as he read it. Frank's been talking more. He revealed something about Winston's contingency plans. He looked up at Sarah, his eyes grave. "If Winston feels threatened, he has a list, names and locations of every family currently under surveillance by the network. He's threatened to release it to his operators if he's cornered." "But that would expose their targets," Sarah said, confused. "Wouldn't that defeat their purpose?" "No," Richard replied grimly. "It would create chaos. Hundreds of families suddenly learning they're being watched, that their children are in danger. The panic would give his operators time to disappear, to destroy evidence, to start over somewhere else." Tommy squeezed Sarah's hand. "Like how we felt when we knew we had to run." Sarah pulled him closer, protective instinct flaring. "Exactly. Like that." A commotion on one of the screens drew their attention. A sleek black car had pulled up to the bank's private entrance. Sarah's heart began to race as a familiar figure emerged, older than in the photographs, face altered by surgery, but with the same calculating eyes she recognized from the hospital records. "He's early," Richard said sharply, reaching for his phone. "Something's wrong." On the screen, Gerald Winston paused at the bank's entrance, adjusting his expensive suit with practiced casualness. But Sarah noticed something in his posture, a tension that seemed out of place. "He knows," she whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "Look at how he's scanning the street. He's expecting trouble." Richard was already speaking rapidly into his phone, warning the FBI team, but it was too late. Winston had pulled something from his pocket, a phone, and was typing quickly. "No." Richard's voice was tight with frustration. "He's activating his contingency plan. He must have had someone watching the bank, warning him about the unusual activity." Sarah watched in horror as Winston turned away from the bank's entrance, moving with deliberate purpose toward a side street. The FBI agents began to move, but they were hampered by the need to maintain their cover, to avoid causing panic in the crowded bank. "They're going to lose him," Sarah said, standing up. "After everything he's done, he's going to disappear again." But Richard's expression had changed, a strange calm settling over his features. "No, he's not, because he just made his first real mistake." Sarah looked at him questioningly. Richard pointed to one of the other screens where data was streaming from Winston's phone signal. "When he sent that message, he activated a tracker we planted in his communication network. Frank gave us access to their secure channels last night." On the main screen, Winston had reached another vehicle, but before he could enter it, Swiss police cars appeared at both ends of the street. FBI agents emerged from the bank, their cover abandoned now that their target was fleeing. "Watch," Richard said softly, as Winston realized he was trapped. 20 years of carefully maintained control, and he's about to learn that he never really had it. They watched as Winston looked frantically for an escape route, his carefully constructed mask of professional dignity crumbling. When he reached into his jacket, several agents drew their weapons. "He's not armed," Richard said, though Sarah noticed his hand tighten on the desk. "He's reaching for his phone again, probably trying to trigger another failsafe." But as Winston pulled out his phone, his expression changed from desperation to confusion. The device in his hand was dead, its screen dark. "The kill switch Frank gave us," Richard explained, allowing himself a small smile. "Every device connected to their secure network just went dark. His entire communication system, 20 years of collected information, all their channels for coordinating activities, gone." Sarah watched as the FBI agents closed in. Gerald, Winston, the man who had orchestrated so much suffering, who had played with lives as if they were pieces on a chessboard, seemed to shrink before their eyes, his authority and power evaporating like morning mist. "It's really happening," Tommy whispered, his eyes wide as Winston was placed in handcuffs. "They're really catching the bad guys." Sarah pulled Tommy onto her lap, holding him close as they watched the architect of their nightmare being led away. But even as relief flooded through her, she noticed something in Winston's expression that sent a chill down her spine. Just before he was placed in the police car, he looked directly at one of the surveillance cameras and smiled. A small, knowing smile that seemed to say this wasn't over. Richard noticed it too. His phone was already in his hand, dialing quickly. "Double the security at the mansion," he ordered, "and get me everything from Frank's latest interrogation. Winston's not the type to be caught without one last card to play." The celebration at the mansion was subdued, despite the magnitude of Winston's capture. Sarah sat in the garden, watching Tommy plant new flowers with Mrs. Reynolds, while Richard coordinated with the FBI inside. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of approaching winter, but Sarah barely noticed the cold. "You should be proud," Catherine Wells said, approaching with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. She had arrived shortly after Winston's arrest, working on a follow-up story to her exposé. "Your courage helped bring down one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in recent history." Sarah accepted the hot chocolate, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm mug. Then why does it feel like we're still waiting for something? Catherine's expression turned serious. Because you're perceptive. The FBI agents I spoke with, they're concerned about Winston's behavior during the arrest. It was too easy, they said, like he wanted to be caught. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down Sarah's spine. Richard thinks the same thing. He's been on the phone all morning checking security, verifying information from Frank's interrogation. As if summoned by their conversation, Richard appeared in the garden doorway. His face was tense and he carried a folder Sarah hadn't seen before. "Sarah, we need to talk." Catherine stood up, professional instinct telling her this was private. "I'll help Mrs. Reynolds with Tommy's gardening." Sarah followed Richard into his study, noting how he locked the door behind them, something he had never done before. "What's wrong?" "Frank finally broke down completely in interrogation," Richard said, opening the folder. "He revealed Winston's final contingency plan, the one he's been saving for decades." Sarah sat in her usual chair, bracing herself. "What is it?" "Winston didn't just target families for exploitation," Richard explained, his voice careful. "He created insurance policies, secrets so devastating that exposing them would destroy countless lives." He pulled out a photograph, newer than the others they had seen. This was taken 6 months ago. Sarah looked at the image and felt her world tilt. It showed her mother, not in her final days of illness, but healthy, alive, sitting in what looked like a cafe. The timestamp on the photo was clear, long after she had supposedly died. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking. "Mum, she died. We were there, we saw her." Richard sat beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "What you saw was carefully staged. Your mother was given drugs to simulate a terminal condition, but she didn't die. She was taken to a private facility, kept sedated while Winston and his network moved forward with their plans for you and Tommy." The room seemed to spin as Sarah tried to process this information. "She's alive? All this time she's been alive?" "Yes," Richard confirmed. "Winston kept her as leverage, his ultimate insurance policy. If he was ever caught, he planned to reveal her location, knowing it would throw any legal proceedings into chaos." Sarah stood up, needing to move, to think. "Where is she? We have to find her." "The FBI is already moving on the facility," Richard assured her. "But Sarah, there's more. Your mother wasn't the only one. Winston kept other parents too, all of them believed dead by their families, all of them held as pawns in his game." The magnitude of this revelation was staggering. Sarah thought of all the families like hers, children who had believed themselves orphaned, who had endured abuse and manipulation while their parents were held captive. "Why?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Why go to such extreme lengths?" "Power," Richard said simply. "By controlling these families completely, making children vulnerable through the loss of their parents, then stepping in as saviors, Winston and his network could shape entire generations. They could identify which children might be useful to them in the future, which ones could be molded into new operators for their organization." Sarah felt sick as she remembered Frank's attempts to isolate them, to break their spirits, to make them dependent on him. "They were grooming us." "Yes," Richard confirmed. "But they never counted on your strength, Sarah. You broke their cycle when you ran away with Tommy. And now..." He was interrupted by his phone buzzing urgently. His expression changed as he read the message. "What is it?" Sarah asked, recognizing the look of concern on his face. "The FBI team just reached the facility where the parents were being held," he said slowly. "It's empty. Everyone's gone, the staff, the security, the parents, including your mother." Sarah felt her knees go weak. "Gone? But how?" Winston's smile at the cameras, Richard realized, his voice tight with frustration. "He wanted us to catch him because he knew what it would trigger. The moment he was arrested, someone must have initiated evacuation procedures at the facility." "So we're back to where we started?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "After everything, they still win." Richard stood up, his expression hardening with determination. "No, because this time we know the truth. This time we have evidence, resources, and an entire task force dedicated to finding them." He moved to the window, looking out at Tommy in the garden. And this time they've underestimated how far we'll go to bring them to justice. Sarah joined him at the window, watching her brother plant seeds for flowers that would bloom in spring. Despite the weight of these new revelations, she felt something solid and determined growing in her chest. "Then we keep fighting," she said firmly. "For Mom, for all the other parents and children they've hurt. We keep fighting until every last one of them is exposed." Richard nodded, but Sarah noticed his hand tighten on the window frame. He knew, as she did, that Winston's last game was just beginning, and this time the stakes were higher than ever before. The FBI's command center had taken over an entire floor of the federal building downtown. Sarah stood before a wall of photographs and documents, each one representing a piece of Winston's elaborate scheme. Her mother's most recent photo held the central position, surrounded by images of other parents thought lost, but now known to be alive. "We've identified 17 families so far," Agent Martinez explained, updating the digital map that tracked Winston's network across the country. Each following the same pattern. A parent becomes mysteriously ill, is declared deceased, and then the children are targeted by one of Winston's operators. Richard stood beside Sarah, his usual business suit replaced by a more casual outfit that still managed to exude authority. "And you're certain about the facility's location?" "An abandoned private hospital in Montana," the agent confirmed, pulling up satellite imagery. "Remote, self-sufficient, with its own power generation and security systems. But by the time our teams arrived, they had cleared out completely. Professional job, they left nothing behind." Sarah studied the satellite photos, trying to imagine her mother in that isolated place. "How long do you think they had been planning this evacuation?" "Years," Richard answered before Agent Martinez could speak. "Winston doesn't leave anything to chance. He would have had multiple contingency plans, multiple facilities ready to receive the parents if the primary location was compromised." Tommy sat at a nearby desk, drawing pictures while half listening to the adults' conversation. He had been unusually quiet since learning about their mother, processing the information in his own way. Sarah watched as he carefully drew what appeared to be their family, not as it had been, but as he hoped it would be. "There's something else," Agent Martinez said, lowering her voice. "We found evidence that some of the medical staff at these facilities weren't there voluntarily. They were former targets of the network, children who had been groomed and manipulated into medical careers, then blackmailed into serving Winston's operation." The revelation hit Sarah hard. She thought of all the children like her and Tommy, shaped by trauma and manipulation, some of them now unwilling participants in Winston's schemes. "They're victims too." "Yes," Richard agreed, his expression grim. "Which makes dismantling this network even more complicated. We need to find a way to help them, not just arrest them." A commotion at the other end of the command center drew their attention. An agent rushed in carrying a laptop. "We've got something." One of the medical staff members reached out. Dr. Emily Chen. She was one of Winston's former targets, worked at the Montana facility for the past 5 years. Room erupted into activity as agents gathered around the computer. Dr. Chen's message was displayed on the main screen, a detailed account of the evacuation procedures, including something that made Sarah's heart race, the location of a secondary facility. "It's a trap," Richard said immediately, studying the information. "Winston would never allow this kind of leak unless it served his purposes." "We thought the same thing," Agent Martinez admitted, but Dr. Chen included details that only someone on the inside would know, including personal information about your mother, Sarah. Sarah moved closer to the screen, reading Dr. Chen's words. The description of her mother was painfully accurate. The way she hummed while reading, her habit of braiding her hair when nervous, the small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. These were things that couldn't have been found in any file. "She's trying to help," Sarah said softly. "Even if Winston is using her message as part of his game, she's trying to give us real information." Richard studied the message more carefully. "Look at the medical terminology she uses. There are inconsistencies, places where her language becomes more casual. Those sections might contain hidden meanings." Agent Martinez nodded. "Our analysts are already working on it, but we need to move quickly. If this secondary facility exists, They'll only keep the parents there temporarily. Tommy had abandoned his drawing and moved to stand beside Sarah. "Is Mom really there?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. Sarah knelt beside him, choosing her words carefully. "We don't know for sure, Tommy, but we're going to find out, and this time we're not alone." Richard's phone buzzed with an incoming message. His expression changed as he read it. Not alarm, but a kind of fierce determination. "Frank's talking again. He says Winston has one more failsafe, something he calls Protocol Zero. If he feels truly cornered, he'll—" He stopped, glancing at Tommy, but Sarah understood. Winston would rather harm the parents than lose control of his operation. The stakes had just become even higher. "How long do we have?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "According to Frank, Winston, we'll wait exactly 48 hours after his arrest before initiating Protocol Zero," Richard replied. "That gives us just over 24 hours to find them." Sarah looked around the command center, at the agents working tirelessly, at the evidence of decades of manipulation and control, at her brother's hopeful face. Somewhere out there, their mother was alive, waiting to be found. But reaching her meant playing Winston's final game, understanding the clues he had deliberately left for them to follow. "Then we better get started," she said, turning back to Dr. Chen's message. "Because this time, we're not just trying to expose the truth, we're trying to save lives." The command center hummed with renewed purpose as agents began analyzing every word of Dr. Chen's message, searching for the hidden truths beneath Winston's carefully laid trap. Time was running out, but for the first time since this nightmare began, they had something precious: hope. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. The FBI command center had become Sarah's temporary home, with Richard ensuring that both she and Tommy were comfortable while remaining close to the investigation. Mrs. Reynolds had brought pillows and blankets, creating a small rest area where Tommy could sleep while the adults worked through the night. Dr. Chen's message contained coordinates, Agent Martinez announced, marking another location on the digital map. But they're spread across 3 different states. Each one could be the secondary facility. Richard studied the map, his analytical mind searching for patterns. They're all in areas with minimal population, good road access, and private airfields. Nearby, exactly what Winston would need for quick evacuations. Sarah had been poring over Dr. Chen's message for hours, looking for anything that might point to her mother. One detail kept nagging at her. "She mentioned my mom's scar, said it was on her left hand, but it's on her right hand. I remember because she used to say it looked like a tiny heart." The room went quiet as agents processed this information. Richard moved to stand beside Sarah, his expression intense. "It's not a mistake. Dr. Chen worked with your mother for 5 years. She would know which hand had the scar. A deliberate error," Agent Martinez said, understanding dawning. "What else does she say about left versus right?" They returned to the message, examining every instance where directions were mentioned. A pattern began to emerge, subtle. Inconsistencies that, when mapped together, formed a clear path to one of the 3 locations. "The Wyoming facility," Richard said, pointing to the map. "Everything points there. The reversed directions, the mistakes in her medical terminology. She's trying to tell us where they are without alerting Winston's people." Sarah felt her heart race. "How can we be sure it's not part of Winston's trap?" "We can't," Agent Martinez admitted. "But we're running out of time. Protocol Zero activates in less than 6 hours. Tommy stirred in his makeshift bed, blinking sleepily at the adults. "Did you find Mom?" Sarah moved to sit beside him, pulling him close. "We think we might have, buddy, but it's complicated." Richard was already on the phone, coordinating with field teams. "We'll need to hit all 3 locations simultaneously," he said. "If we're wrong about Wyoming, we can't risk losing our chance at the other sites." The command center erupted into organized chaos as agents prepared for the coordinated raids. Sarah watched as tactical teams were assembled, medical personnel were put on standby, and evacuation protocols were established. "Sarah," Richard said softly, pulling her aside, "I need you to be prepared. Whatever we find at these facilities, it might not be what we're hoping for." she nodded, understanding the weight of his words. But we have to try. For all the families, not just ours. A young agent rushed into the room carrying a tablet. New information from the Winston interrogation. He's talking, but it's strange. He keeps repeating the same phrase. The children always find their way home. Richard's expression changed, a memory surfacing. It's another clue. When I was a child, before I escaped his influence, he used to say that. It was part of their methodology, making children believe they had no choice but to return to their abusers. But we did have a choice, Sarah said firmly. We chose to run, to fight back, and now we're choosing to save others from the same. Fate! The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah insisted on being in the command center when the raids began, needing to know immediately if they found her mother. Tommy stayed close, drawing pictures of their family reunited, his quiet hope giving Sarah strength. As the clock ticked down toward Winston's deadline, Sarah found herself standing before the evidence wall one last time. The photographs of all, the missing parents seemed to watch her, their faces filled with the same quiet strength she remembered in her mother. It's time, Richard announced as the tactical teams reported ready. Whatever happens next, remember, you've already won. The most important battle. You broke free of their control, helped expose their network. Everything else is just bringing our family back together, Sarah finished, squeezing Tommy's hand. All of our families. The command center fell silent as the raids began, 3 teams moving simultaneously on 3 different facilities. Sarah held her breath, watching the live feeds, waiting for the moment that would either validate their hope or send them back to searching. But even as she watched the teams breach the facilities, Sarah knew that something had fundamentally